start with this set to go down next week on the 27th in Seoul, South Korea. Hyun-Mi Choi, former WBA super featherweight champion, will be taking on Jessica Camara for what is a WBA gold title, what is the vacant WBA gold title that the WBA manufactured out of thin air. There was no WBA gold champion. Katie Taylor has reigned and still reigns as this division's full WBA champion, though at the moment she is otherwise preoccupied at 140 pounds, where she also reigns as undisputed champion. Thus, Hyun-Mi Choi and Jessica Camara, they're gonna fight for this trinket. Hyun-Mi Choi sports a professional record of 21 wins with no losses, 1 draw, 5 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 22 professional bouts. The former WBA super featherweight champion who has since moved up in weight. She's going to be campaigning as a lightweight moving forward. Been a champion at 2 weights. Champion at featherweight, subsequently a champion at super featherweight. In this, what looks to be her bid to try and become a 3-division champion overall, it's important to note that winning the WBA gold title won't make her a full champion at lightweight, but it points her in the right direction. If she can make it past Jessica Camara, who sports a professional record of 12 wins with 4 losses, no draws, 3 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times in 16 professional bouts. 3 years older than Hyun-Mi Choi. Jessica Camara is 36, whereas Hyun-Mi Choi is a very spry 33. Jessica Camara, who last saw action in December of last year opposite the ring of Stefania Oliva, who she stopped in 4 rounds. Jessica saw action 3 times last year. She kicked off the year with that loss to Charlo Zamora, then rebounded with Joanna Lopez and subsequently followed up with a win over Stefania Oliva. In that way, she's fought 3 times in the last 12 months, and she ain't got no ring rust to shake off. On a 2-fight winning streak. Whereas Hyun-Mi Choi has been a lot less active in the previous calendar year and a lot less active in previous years overall. She's been averaging 1 fight a year for the last 6 years. Last in action in July of last year against former champion Maria Maderna of Argentina, who she won a unanimous decision against over 10 rounds. It's a tough fight to edge. This one is because there's a legitimate argument that Jessica Camara is a better technician, a better tactician than Hyun-Mi Choi. But is that really going to be enough to secure the W for Jessica Camara on foreign soil and hostile territory? You have to remember, this is going down in Seoul, South Korea. Hyun-Mi Choi will have home field advantage, and comparatively, Hyun-Mi Choi is the more prolific puncher of the two, whereas Jessica, she likes to move and punch. Good boxer. The work is easy to appreciate, neat and tidy, a lot more neat and tidy than what you get from Hyun-Mi Choi. Best described as an aggressive, mid-range to inside volume puncher. Very good physical dimensions for these weights. She's got some height, she's got some length, but she's not a long-distance fighter. She likes to step into a jab, bring the backhand over, throw punches mid-range to inside. She's busy. The dichotomy of the fight is the boxer versus the puncher, with Jessica Camara being a boxer and Hyun-Mi Choi being a puncher. Hyun-Mi Choi having home field advantage and being the house fighter, her aggression and her activity is likely going to be rewarded by the judges, even if Jessica manages to show the neater and tidier work, the cleaner boxing. She has somewhat better form. Better defense, catching and shooting out of high guard, good counter shots, movement. She's good. They're not that big on power, though. I don't think she lands with the same authority that Hyun-Mi Choi does. That punch for punch, I actually think Hyun-Mi Choi is a stronger puncher than Jessica. She's persistent. Might take one to give one on her way in. She's persistent enough that I don't know that Jessica Camara can shake and bake her. I don't know that Jessica will be able to keep her off. Jessica's not the strongest puncher. Even though she's a polished boxer, I have seen Jessica Camara drawn out into exchanges. I have seen her drawn out into wars. That's how she got knocked out by Charlo Zamora. She's good, but she can be caught. If you're persistent, you can draw her out. Charlo Zamora was persistent, and Hyun-Mi Choi can be persistent enough to make it close, and make it close enough that the judges swing it her way. I feel like Hyun-Mi Choi is the natural choice here for 2 reasons. I feel like she's the natural choice because she's busier within a round while having home field advantage, and that may sway the judge's decision. And if nothing else, she can draw Jessica Camara out into an exchange, and she is a harder puncher than Jessica. So it may not go to a decision. Jessica's been knocked out before, 2 times. By fighters who are not as technical as she is, as cerebral. You know, Hyun-Mi Choi, she's not really cerebral either. She's a gunslinger. Sometimes messy. But sometimes being messy is what gets the job done. Being persistent, being imposing, and letting punches go.
Choi's likely to do that to Jessica.
Thus, by hook or by crook, I've got Choi winning next week and becoming this division's WBA Gold Champion. Men's junior middleweight news, the ongoing fallout of Charlo's decision to invoke his champion in recess privilege to set up an Israel Madrimov clash.
If he had been stripped outright of the title, stripped outright for not satisfying his mandatory challenger, then he wouldn't have these privileges.
But they labeled him a champion in recess and awarded his title to the winner of Madrimov versus Kurbanov, who we all know was Israel Madrimov. And people aren't happy.
Why?
Because he could be standing in the way of Crawford's next fight. People want to see Crawford return to action, and they don't want to see Charlo, not based on the uninspiring performance he put on against Canelo Alvarez. His stock is at an all-time low.
Go away.
People don't want to see Charlo, let alone standing in the way of what could be Terence Crawford's next fight, crashing the party. Some are interpreting this as the PBC's way of blocking Terence Crawford's fight, blackballing him, essentially.
Payback.
For not staying on their side of things. Some are saying it's because he didn't fight Jaron Boots Ennis, which I don't agree with. Jaron Ennis ended up leaving them.
Would they do that?
Well, I don't put it past them. For a very long time, they did try to freeze Terence Crawford out of the welterweight division, but that's back when they were invested in the welterweight division.
You don't think they're invested?
I'm not really convinced it's a fight that Charlo is after, and I'm not fully convinced this is the PBC trying to blackball him.
Not fully.
So much as a fighter who doesn't want to fight, trying to make some money without having to.
What?
I'm not convinced it's a fight that Charlo is after. I remember when Tim Tszyu first came into the picture. Tim Tszyu, who was more well-known then than Israel Madrimov is now. And back then, when he first came into the frame, Charlo wouldn't even entertain him. He wouldn't give him the time of day. So all of a sudden, he wants to fight this guy.
Who's lesser known than that guy?
That guy who has a country behind him and is a pay-per-view draw in his country, unlike Israel Madrimov. You're telling me the same Charlo that turned his nose up at Tim Tszyu all of a sudden wants to fight Israel Madrimov.
Why?
It's a high-risk, low-reward fight for a guy who hasn't made this weight in a very long time. What has it been? 2 years? He hasn't made the junior middleweight limit since May of 2022 when he fought Brian Castano for the second time. That's roughly 2 years ago. 2 years later.
He's gonna make it for this guy.
Come down from 168, boil all the way back down to 154 for this guy.
To make what amount of money?
Charlo versus Madrimov is not a big money fight, and it's a high-risk, low-reward opponent. Charlo, I'm not convinced it's a fight that he's after. What he's doing is using his status as a champion in recess to try to squeeze a few dollars out of the event coordinators. Make some money without having to throw a punch.
But if you want to make this Crawford versus Madrimov fight, you have to pay.
You have to pay Charlo to step aside, allowing him to make a few quick bucks without having to throw a punch.
I'm not worried about it.
I'm not. I think if push comes to shove, the WBA, given who's putting together this fight, who's paying for it, Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh, His Excellency himself, they'll allow this contest to go on, kind of like the World Boxing Council allowed Better Beef versus Bivol to go on. You will remember, they took a stance. Due to the war between Ukraine and Russia, they wanted to get political up until the Saudis got involved.
All that Saudi money.
Suddenly, they were less concerned with geopolitics and their political ideologies and more concerned with making a big fight happen.
Letting a big fight happen.
The WBA is the WBC's sister organization, and you notice that the WBC didn't stand on principle. I don't think the WBA is going to either. At the worst of it, maybe they got to throw Jermell a few dollars to step aside. Maybe.
But I'm not worried about him stopping his fight.
I'm not, because I don't even think it's a fight that he's after. He's just looking for a few bucks.
What if he did get the fight, though?
Just for argument's sake, if he did, he'd get his fucking ass kicked.
Get beat the fuck up.
The guy hasn't made this weight in 2 years. This guy that he's fighting, he's a mover and he's a puncher. A tricky guy who stays in front of you, giving you different looks, changing levels, coming at you from different angles against the depleted, drained Charlo that's coming off of a demoralizing loss and what would be a hard weight cut. No, I don't think he's looking for a fight, but if he got one, if he got Israel in the ring, Israel would kick his ass.
It's not gonna have to.
Worst comes to worst, they'll pay Charlo to go away, and he'll go away and stay away, because I don't think he'll be fighting at 154 anymore. Fighting at 154, fighting, that is not what this is about.
He's grifting.
Just using his status as a champion in recess to siphon a few dollars from the event coordinators. That's all it is. Bum tactics.
From Bum Charlo.
Bums. The both of them.
Jamal, too. Don't you remember he called up Aiden Ross a few weeks ago asking for money?
Guys are fucking bums. Finally, upstairs in super middleweight and light heavyweight news, per a tweet from Mike Kopinger, the WBA will name Edgar Berlanga mandatory challenger to Canelo Alvarez's super middleweight championship per a letter obtained by ESPN. According to the letter, WBA regular super middleweight title holder David Morrell will move up to 175 for a fight with Vladivaj Hot Rod Kalajic in June in Minneapolis. That bout will be for the WBA regular light heavyweight title. Dmitry Bivol is currently the full champion.
So the PBC are doing 2 cards in June?
Looks like it. What's supposed to be the Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin fight, that's supposed to be going down in Houston. This upcoming David Morrell fight is supposed to be going down in Minneapolis. Based on previous reports, I can only deduce that this will be the free fight, the non-pay-per-view fight we heard several weeks ago that the PBC would be putting on in the month of June.
Morrell versus Kalajic.
There's a lot to address when it comes to this story. Edgar Berlanga, quite undeservingly, is being allowed to move into a mandatory position that lines him up for a Canelo Alvarez fight without having to fight David Morrell, and yet it's all up to the WBA, isn't it? I mean, it's their decision. They could have ordered a fight between Edgar and David Morrell and did it that way, but they are so choosing to do it this way.
Why?
David Morrell has been WBA regular champion for some months now and some fights. Is it the chicken and the egg? Is it that they're moving Edgar into that position because David is moving up?
That news broke a few days ago, that David would be leaving 168.
This news broke afterwards. So is it as a result of David Morrell moving up that they are now sliding Edgar Berlanga into that position? If he were staying at 168, if he were going to stay WBA regular champion, what would they have done then? Would they have ordered a fight between them? Behind the scenes, who really fucking knows?
They're manufacturing another WBA regular title?
Out of thin air, what you see they're doing when it comes to Hyun-Mi Choi and Jessica Camara manufacturing a WBA gold title, that's what they're doing here. They're manufacturing a WBA regular title at 175, where 2.5 or 3 years ago, the WBA announced that they were going to be phasing out all of these secondary titles, just all of these trinket titles, the interim, the gold, the regular. It seems they're now doubling back on that.
They're gonna start mass-producing trinket titles again. That's how it looks. That was under pressure from the ABC Commission.
They're the ones that ordered the WBA to phase out all those baby belts. And they were doing that for a while, they were, but I guess that pressure has been so alleviated and the WBA is free now to mass produce more secondary titles, because that's what they're doing for David.
They don't have to.
They don't have to manufacture a title to crown the winner of this fight, the mandatory. They don't have to do that. They want to do that.
Why?
Optics for the PBC, that they have some version of a light heavyweight champion. Optics for the PBC, maybe. Sanctioning fees.
Another belt, another sanctioning fee.
David Morrell took to his social media to announce that he would be moving up to light heavyweight to catch up to all the guys, or the guy that is avoiding him. He's got to be talking about David Benavidez, because he, like David Morrell, he's set to be going up there too, very soon, for Alexander Vajdik.
That is a WBC interim title fight. In many ways, this is a WBA interim title fight.
It's the same fucking thing. With the both of these guys moving up to light heavyweight and Edgar Berlanga being moved into a mandatory position at super middle, is it possible Canelo Alvarez fights Edgar next? If he does, I can't support that. I can't support that fight. I would have preferred to see Canelo fight either David Benavidez or David Morrell, not Edgar Berlanga. Edgar sucks.
Horrible.
And if they are lining up Edgar for a Canelo Alvarez fight, does that mean that after this Munguia fight, Canelo's going to go back to the zone? He's going to go back to Matchroom? Because that's who Edgar is with. Remember that Canelo Alvarez's 3-fight deal, what was his 3-fight deal with the PBC, it has since been amended. It's not a 3-fight deal anymore.
Beats Jaime, he's free to go, free to fight somebody else, somewhere else.
So it could break down, or at the chance to fight Canelo Alvarez, maybe Matchroom sends Edgar over. They don't get in the way. They let Canelo have him. Send him to Amazon.
Fight sucks on Amazon like it sucks on DAZN. That fight sucks.
So, David Morrell is moving up to light heavyweight. I like this fighter. He is an exciting fighter, a capable fighter that does not have that many fights. What's the chance that David Morrell becomes a full champion at 175?
What are the odds?
Well, if he has to go through either Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev to do it, if he has to go through one of them, then I don't like his chances. But if he stays up there and makes his bones, has a couple of fights, waits long enough that he can pick up a vacant title, I like his chances then. I don't think he has enough experience here and now to fight the winner of that fight straight away. Whoever wins, whether it's Artur or Dimitri, he don't beat the winner of that fight.
But I don't think he's trying to.
I think the people at the PBC are just positioning their pieces on the board up there at light heavyweight to pick up a vacant title in the near future should one become vacant, one or some. Hypothesize that Artur beats Dimitri, becomes undisputed champion. I don't think he sticks around at light heavyweight anymore. After that, I think he would move up in weight, move up to cruiser, vacate all the titles that he won, at which point those titles would be redistributed.
That's if Artur wins.
If Dimitri wins, I don't think that happens. If Dimitri wins, no, I don't think he moves up to cruiser. I think he stays put. He stays right there at light heavyweight, and they would have to go through him to win a title. And I wouldn't pick any of these basic fighters to beat Dimitri, especially not if he beats Artur.
David Morrell is basic?
No, David Benavidez is basic, but David Morrell is green. Doesn't have that many fights. These guys he's beating up, these guys he's pouncing on.
I mean, it's all right that he's doing that and looking the way he's looking with so few pro fights, but that don't speak to what he'd face up there at light heavyweight.
So, there are a lot of moving parts. We'll see what happens.